You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I have a guest kind of lucky to land, Jayne Karma Lamo. It is such a great pleasure to reach you up in British Columbia, Canada. Welcome to Something Rather Than Nothing.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat today.
Yeah, I listening to your songs, and so excited to encounter your work via a collaboration with Melissa Oliveri, who's been a guest twice and a co-host. She's even taken over the show once. Great friend of the show, and it's great to connect with you that way. Jayne, tell us about your connection to music. Did you, when you were young, were you an artist? Were you doing songs then? Your connection to creativity. When did you see yourself as a musician artist?
Yeah, so I have some pretty deep family roots to music that go back to my childhood. My father is a musician. He has always had a really great space for music wherever he's lived. He's had some really epic home studios that I was fortunate enough to be able to play around in as a child, and playing around with microphones and drum kits and all sorts of fun instruments of like the 80s and 90s was pretty exciting as a kid. So I would definitely say that my first inspiration with music came from my father, whose name is Jay. And he was in a few bands in the 80s, probably the 70s too. Just sort of local bands with friends and playing gigs and stuff. And he's recorded some of his own albums in his own studio. And so, yeah, my roots go back to my dad, and I've been singing since I was a kid. And my first instrument I picked up was the bass guitar. Well, actually, no, I lie. The piano. I had some piano lessons before that, which I wasn't really like super into, but they were a good foundation for music theory. But my first, main instrument that I took seriously was the bass guitar when I was about 11 or 12. Started playing that in the school band and at home, and started playing guitar after that, because bass isn't always the most fun solo in your bedroom instrument. So
I've heard that.
And like, although I have written quite a few songs out of bass lines, I remember at the time finding it like a little bit easier to compose songs on the guitar. And so I picked up the guitar around age like 12, 13, and didn't have a lot of people other than my dad and like his friends to play music with until I was really like in university, other than the school band. And so, I played a little bit of music with others in university, nothing really serious, did some songwriting. I did record an album at about age 16, 17 in my dad's studio that I still have, which I was really proud of at the time. And it's a pretty cool time capsule to look back at and listen to. But considering myself like an artist, like, I don't know, like, I always thought of myself as a musician, from the time I started playing instruments, but I never really thought of myself as a serious artist until actually maybe in the last like 4 or 5 years, to be
Okay.
honest. So post raising my kids as young children, I'm kind of at the age as a mom now where I have a lot more flexibility. The kids are a little bit older and more self-sufficient. Can start exploring my identity again beyond a mom. So I've been doing that for the last last few years, and I feel actually comfortable now calling myself like a professional musician or performing artist. Whereas if you had asked me in my 20s, I probably wouldn't have said that.
Well, it's good. It's good to, move into that identity, see yourself in that way. And of course, I find it, fascinating, say, in the last few years with that. So, tell us, so first of all, listeners, Jayne does, some electronic music, under Sacred Cranium, does soundscapes, and you've described the music that you do. It's always tough to talk about music, but you know what? I'm not going to talk about it how you described it. I'll tell you how I heard it and some of my impressions and listened to it, and they're kind of just raw. So there's certain types of music, so like everybody will say, hey, check out this album, right? And you put it, you set it aside and you try to get into it. And I started listening to music and it was like I had listened to it before. Like there was something about the music, and not like in the repetition, but like that the area was comfortable to me. And I felt like underneath, like just that deep Depeche Mode, alt rock, feel, like a feel tied to it. I really, really enjoyed all your music. It fits into maybe my head, music wise, where I reside, and powerful as well, with lyrics and vocally. So you got your electronic music, singer songwriter there, and you do some collaborations as well. When you go into soundscape or you're going into this other form of music, are these completely different experiences for you in putting them together? It's just like, this is the manifestation of me and here it comes. What's that experience like for you? Because they're different.
Yeah, I definitely like music. Music is my main calling. Like I feel as a spiritual entity, I feel like that's what I need to do. It's my soul's work. And so, but that being said, yeah, it definitely comes out in a variety of ways. So like my main thing is the alt rock thing under my my Buddhist name is Jayne Karma Lamo, and so I used that name for my main artist name, where I do all my alt rock stuff and singer songwriter stuff, and I also I do the electronic stuff under Sacred Cranium. When I initially started releasing stuff, I separated the electronic stuff from the alt rock stuff because I knew it wouldn't appeal necessarily to the same audiences. And with the electronic stuff, I was being a lot cheekier and using a lot more profanity, and so I kind of like
cheekier edge is good. You need that.
Yeah, it was kind of I started doing it. I shouldn't say since my teens, I've really enjoyed electronic music, and I'd say probably like my foray into that was 9 Inch Nails, and then it just took off from there. But my way in was that I started playing around actually with GarageBand, and they have some really awesome stock synths and stuff. And so like I didn't have to buy like a really expensive synthesizer to make what I thought sounded like pretty cool electronic stuff. So I started just messing around with GarageBand and eventually moved into Logic Pro, and that's how I launched into that. And it's a totally different mood, the electronic stuff. Like it's it's a lot cheekier. It's a lot, I don't know, like it's less serious. I take myself less seriously with that, with Under My Sacred Cranium name. And then with the soundscapes, I started really getting into that when I was doing some spiritual work, and for a long time was really interested in owning some of the really cool acoustic sound healing instruments like crystal bowls and gongs and all of that. And I never really had the money to really get into that. And eventually I was sort of able to afford some of that around the same time I was doing some spiritual work with a beautiful, wonderful person whose name is Angela Pryder. And she's been a real mentor for me in my music in general. She's been really supportive of that piece of me being, who I am, and it needing expression. Yeah. And she invited me to be a part of her group, which at the time was called Sisters in Sound, which was 4 of us women all walking a similar spiritual path, and we were doing events where we would put on an immersive sound journey with sort of spiritual elements to it for pretty decent sized crowds. As Angela has a really amazing community down there on the coast, Vancouver, BC area. And so, I really credit her for really making me feel like I could own that and embrace that part of myself. And what has often come out of me over the years more organically is the alt rock stuff. But I really enjoy doing the soundscapes, doing the sound journeys for people because of the way it makes people feel and the healing qualities that it allows for. It's a real privilege to be able to offer that to people and to just create a safe space for people to, have emotional release and to find peace and calm and grounding energy. So yeah, it's sort of more of a more spiritual work. I feel like that's more spiritual work, more community service minded work. And sort of, being of service to people with sound. Whereas the alt rock Jayne Karma Lamo stuff is more like my true, real core self coming out, and all my musical influences from my childhood coming out, and all of that. And then the electronic stuff is kind of like a fun side thing that I get to sometimes, but not as often.
I was listening to I hope I pronounce it right, Solfeggio 528 last night on folks. I got it on Bandcamp. Went over there and found Jayne, and I've practiced and studied Buddhism. My background, I grew up in Rhode Island, which means you grow up Roman Catholic. Out in the East Coast in Rhode Island, it's just a lot of the immigration trends and stuff. It's just a lot of Catholic migration from Quebec, mill workers, Catholics, and Portuguese Catholic, like a lot of Catholics there. So I grew up, but when I went to Marquette University to study philosophy, I started studying Buddhism and then started practicing largely within the Shambhala Tibetan tradition. And so I'll never ask for a reconciliation of my spirituality. I believe it's particular to my experience, but Buddhism's always been a massive influence, not just intellectually, which is how I approached it initially, but within the practice. And when I saw the soundscapes in that work, of course, I was able to recognize many of the sounds. And I started to think very much as you had talked about it, pardon me, just healing with the sounds. I think of when I'm within the Buddhist mindset of, my head and meditation and space and thoughts and trying to create some space there, but just the immersion within sound and how that heals. How does sound heal? What do you know, Jayne, in that? I mean, because it does. I went to sleep. I slept. Very restful sleep. I felt more complete. Thank you, Solfeggio. No, it was a wonderful experience. I don't know everything that happened, but tell me, what is it about the sounds or the soundscapes with you probably thinking about helping people with their suffering? What's going on with those sounds?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to acknowledge how cool it is that you were part of the Shambhala community too, because I was meditating with them in Vancouver
Oh my gosh.
for a while too. Yeah, I was actually the umze who would strike the. I don't want to use the word strike. We were never supposed to use the word strike, but who would sound the big bowl at the beginning of the the meditation for a little bit. And they were a great community to be part of, and that's really cool that we have that we have that commonality.
Yeah, I practice. Not to jump in there, but I practice in Milwaukee, Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I started to go to that center, and then I lived in Madison, Wisconsin. And they had another smaller center, and I've been to like kind of full day retreats out in Portland as well. Sorry to interrupt, but that connection where we were both, kind of in the same room in some sort of way in different spots.
Totally. That's very cool. Yeah, I will often credit like Buddhism as just like really being life-saving for me. I didn't grow up Catholic, but I was raised Christian, and it didn't vibe for me after a certain point, and and I really found Buddhism in my 20s, and it was profoundly life-changing for me, and I've had several different teachers, and I've sat with different lineages there, and I even had the privilege of being on retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh.
What?
Yeah, it was a big retreat out at UBC in Vancouver, and there was probably about 700 of us there. And it was only, I want to say only a couple of years after that he had his stroke.
Yeah, that was devastating. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll always feel very fortunate. I was pregnant with my first kiddo when I went on retreat with him, and I just, Buddhism has been so powerful for me. And that's one of the reasons I chose the Buddhist name that I was given as my artist name, because it kind of just became my name. And because of how powerful that was for me. So now I can't remember the question. I feel like it was like,
well, wait a second. We had a,
how is it healing? How is it healing, right?
Just what's going on there? Because what a powerful notion, right? I mean, we talk about words and philosophy. I think that philosophy can be used as some sort of heuristic, some sort of like in Buddhism that we're talking about, right? That there is suffering. What we're trying not to do is compound the levels of suffering or suffer over the fact that we are suffering. But what can the sound do for us? What can that sound do for us? How does it heal us?
Well, there's actually some pretty cool like science around sound and its healing abilities, and And one of the more recent things that I've stumbled across is that after a gong bath in particular, there was a person who was doing live blood analysis before and after a gong bath, and they noticed like a profound structural change to the blood of people who had experienced a gong bath. Like, and yeah, I think the study included some images like from a slide.
Yeah.
That she had, she or he, I can't remember. But this person had prepared slides of blood that had been drawn before and then after, and you could see that like some of the red blood cells were kind of clumped together and sluggish, before the gong bath, and after the gong bath, everything was sort of nicely spaced out and symmetrical and flowing, and like
Whoa.
It was a really profound difference. And I know that I feel a huge difference when I go to a gong bath. Like it's almost like you can feel it just wash through your energy field.
Yeah.
And so that was a cool little scientific piece. And I know there's so many videos where you see somebody, projecting some sort of sound wave at water or sand, and then, it'll form really cool mandala-like, formations in whatever medium you're projecting it at really complex patterns. But they're usually, like really organized patterns, which is really cool. So I feel like it kind of like, I feel like sound has the ability to bring like helpful structure to, to chaos in some ways. And even just thinking about using sound as a meditation tool and focusing in on certain sounds during meditation, I can see how that brings a certain structure and focus to the mind. And during some of the sound baths that I do, I really think about what instruments I'm playing and what mood and what kind of focus I want to create at a particular moment. And I feel like different sounds, focusing on different sounds, it evokes different feelings, it evokes different states of mind, and different sounds can actually activate different brain waves. That's been demonstrated in certain studies as well. So some of the sounds that a lot of people who are doing sound healing events will choose to play during their events are known to sort of produce different calming brain waves and things like that. And we can think about like, in terms of like even those little experiments you can do where you talk to a plant and you say loving things to a plant, or you say hateful things to a plant, and you can see like it just changes the life force of the plant. And I think that music, I think we can only assume that music has to do the same thing. But the other thing is that I think that probably music is, it's such a subjective experience for everybody that you got to wonder too about like, one piece of music might affect the molecules of one being in a totally different way than it does another being. And so that's a very fascinating aspect of how music can heal us. Because I can listen to like a heavy metal song and feel like, empowered and like and alive and like my life force is being fed by that music. And another person can listen to that same piece of music and it's like nails on a chalkboard. And it probably like really affects them negatively. So yeah, I feel like there's so much to explore in terms of the science of healing of music, but just intuitively and just anecdotally, I've experienced so much healing from music and you know, and from all kinds of music. I've experienced healing from, you know, mantra in the same way that I've experienced healing from, like, you know, a Nine Inch Nails song, because I
Yeah.
relate, you know, so
Yeah.
much to what's being said, or just the melody evokes something in me, you know. So yeah, I think that music is very healing, and as a musician, being able to pour yourself into your music, and like, music for me is healing in that way as well. Just being able to put my emotions there and to put my thoughts and feelings there in a way that's more safe than just talking about them with others. So I feel like as a musician, as a composer, music is healing in that way too. It gives you like an outlet for your feelings and thoughts, and allows you to put some structure to it, and put it somewhere that is healthy, and that other people might listen to and relate to and go, hey, I'm going through that, or hey, I also thought that, or just, you know, for me as a melody person, I always connect to melody first in music, more so than lyrics. Just being able to relate to a melody and being like, ooh, that touches me in that way, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I think talking about there's such a power behind talking about thinking about healing or being able to receive whatever those energies are through music. And I think if you engage with kind of like spiritual work or Buddhism, like there's a there's a quest for like beyond the suffering on some level, or like whatever you come from it, like that there's transformation possible. And that's one thing that surprised me in doing this show over 200 episodes now, is like, I think when you create something, maybe you could say it with your music, like when you start creating things, you don't you will truly never know the why and the how and the what it is. I think maybe the what it is. And as it develops, you're like, oh, that's what it is. Like I couldn't see it then. And part of it for the podcast has been healing. And then I said, well, for me, like with philosophy, right? So what is philosophy, right? Like it's a joke, right? Like I know a philosopher. I mean, it's fun, right? It's oh, you studied philosophy. What do you do? And well, meanwhile, most philosophers I know are well employed, but that's another matter. But like, what do you do? What do you do with like all these big all these big questions of philosophy? For me, when I went to the university, and I didn't know what I was doing. I graduated high school, smart guy, whatever, and I go to the university. Philosophy and was the place for me that I could hold everything, like intellectually, like I could hold everything there. Like, why is this? Why is there the universe and all that stuff? Now, those are weird ass things to study in late capitalism, like America. But like for me, I needed a place for my head to fit. And I always saw philosophy as therapeutic, or the laughing that you do and the absurdity of doing philosophy as therapeutic, of studying Buddhism and practicing Buddhism as therapeutic. And the power and the energy of that has been incredible to think about, and collectively too, Jayne, right? Like you and I sharing this, or that when you sit in the sangha and you're meditating, you don't think about all the time that there are others near you, but everybody's going through this process to move towards something, and they can impact you and you can impact you. So I know I'm rambling a bit on that, but it's the power within all those things of expression that, at least for me, makes me feel like, you know what, I can do this. Or maybe with you and your music expression and meditation and soundscapes, I can do this and I can share this.
Yeah, yeah. And Mash, man, I have like so much respect for you, and in like in doing this podcast, and because like I know how hard it is to like, put yourself out there and like, and when I'm sure like, I don't know what your experience was when you first started putting your self expressions out there, but for me it was like crickets, man. Like people were like, okay,
Yeah,
man.
similar experience, podcast and yeah.
You just have to kind of like keep pushing through it and being like, okay, like this is what I'm doing, and it feels right and it feels good. And like eventually you get to a place where people are like, okay, like I kind of see what you're doing, like I see it, I vibe with it, like,
Yeah.
and like, but it takes a certain like gumption to get there, like, and like to just be like, okay, like I'm putting myself out here, being vulnerable with my thoughts and my curiosities and everything, and like, and when like most artists that I've talked to have a similar experience. It's like when you first start putting stuff out there, people are just like, whatever, or like, or they don't even look at it. It's like people don't even want to try to look at it or try and listen to it at first until other people are listening to it, and other people are like, oh, well, maybe you should, check this out. And like, it's like, I mean, for me, I don't know. I'm always really curious about my friend's self-expression because, I mean, I've always been a people studier. I've always been fascinated with people. My degree is in psychology.
Yeah.
And I love exploring the vastness of people's souls. And like, I hate shallow conversation. Like I love just going right into like just deep conversation with people right off the bat, because I'm like, this is what matters, like,
I know.
and so now I forget where I was going with that.
Nah, so that's all right. I think there's there's a particular risk with us doing this show here, which is a good risk. Is we brought up a lot already, and there's probably 3 embedded questions down below.
I know what it was. I know what it was now. It was like I'm always curious about other people's art. Like when I know somebody and I find out they're producing art or they're writing or they're, they've got some creative project that they're into. I'm like, give me that. Like, I'm like, I want to see that. I want to hear that, but I think for the masses, that's not always the case. People are just kind of like, what? Like, and I actually had one coworker tell me one time, she said, you know what? Like, I didn't listen to your music at first because I thought it would be bad. And I didn't want to hear it and then have it be bad and be like embarrassed for you.
Wow, then, that's a complicated sentiment.
I know, and I was like, I never really thought about it like that, because I'm just so anxious to like just explore people and however they are, that I never thought that somebody could be like, actually like, ooh, this could be awkward. Like if I listen to your music and it's bad. And she was just like, but then I listened to it and then it was actually really good. And
yeah, it was. That's why I put it out.
It was funny to me. Like, so yeah, like the long and short of that was that like, yeah, I really respect you as an individual for doing this and putting yourself out there, because I know how it can be.
Well,
it can be really punishing when you first begin.
Yeah, I think for me, part of it there are 2 things. One is my general. I work my day job as a union organizer, and there's this weird dynamic of like, I don't behaviorally look for affirmation from everybody because it'd be wrong. Because if I'm affirmed by people who really are on the complete opposite side of what I do, then if I'm looking for that affirmation, I'm looking for something that's improper, right? So it's
Yeah.
just like how, had taken risks. I did this psychological quick assessment. You know how there's some of these tests and things like that, and some of them have great validity. This was a high level one, but what it showed was that like I can't do I can do, but I don't like to spend my time on like all like the details here and this and this and this piece. But when it comes to like risk taking within creation, others, it's like way off the charts, right? So I'm not afraid of taking risks, which was helpful to explain back to me. But the big piece for me, and I said it a few times during the show, was reading Amanda Palmer's The Art of Asking, the book. And for me, as a philosopher, and when I read that, I just heard her saying that, like, there's nothing between you and the ask, or asking for help, or asking for support, or busking, or going out and putting yourself out there and say, or go to people you don't know and say, hey, do you want to come on this podcast and philosophy show? And it was really reading that about Amanda Palmer and her experiences of being like, hey, if you're an artist, like, be an artist, like, get in there, not asking for permission. And when you need to ask somebody for something, like, how did you create that song? Contact them. They might respond. So ask. And that's all the energy back behind me, that sentiment in doing this. So I guess I'd say I didn't have that much trouble about like putting it out there or doing it. Just kind of like I did it, but with that momentum behind me and that thinking behind me.
That's fantastic momentum. And I definitely have not always had that. I've been, I think with all the spiritual work that I've done, like I really don't seek as much validation as I would have like in my 20s, early 20s, but I have this, and I think a lot of people who are neurodivergent have this as well, is this, and now I can't think of the term for it, but like just this terrible like self-doubt about my artistry, and like, I mean, really just about like everything about myself. Imposter syndrome. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
I have a terrible case of imposter syndrome. And I've always had this for as long as I can remember. And it doesn't matter how skilled I get at something. Like, I still think that I am terrible at it. And so like, yeah, like when you put yourself out there as an artist and yeah, it is crickets, or like people just don't seem to care or whatever, then that little voice in your head goes, well, maybe you are terrible at it. But I've had to like really train my brain to not do that, because it's really irrational. And my brain even goes as far as to like, when I'll get compliments on my music, like I'll be like, oh, well, they're just being nice, they're just,
yeah.
So like, I don't experience it as like success. I just experience it as like, oh, this person's just like, throwing me a bone or whatever. So like, I have this experience myself of like just this massive self-doubt. So I have to keep like training myself out of that, and just saying to myself that, yeah, this is you, and this is worthy of expression, and and the right people will connect to it. Like, especially like with music, music is so personal and so subjective, and there's so much music out now. Like, holy smokes. Like, just like, finding, someone happening across my music is like a needle in a haystack these days. And so like, but yeah, you have to kind of believe as an artist that like, the people who need to hear it will hear it. And that's it. And even if it only impacts like one person, that's awesome. The song is called Fizzle Out. And like I've had a lot of experience in my life of having more so in friendships, not so much with romance, but more in friendships, and just having things just kind of dissolve over time. And I've not had very many moments where I've had like an explosive end to like a friendship. And I really knew what happened. It's been kind of like a slow burn where things just kind of like dissipate, and I'm left feeling kind of like, well, what happened? Like, did I do something? Like, is it life? Is it, like, did we just move in different directions? Is it something I said? Is it something I did? And so in that same vein, like, I actually really appreciate it when people say to me, hey, this thing that you said or this thing that you did, it really rubbed me the wrong way, or it really, triggered me this way. I actually really appreciate that stuff. And so for me as a neurodivergent person to be able to, have really good functional relationships, like I actually need people sometimes to say to me, hey, could you maybe not do this? Or could you, this thing that you said, it bothered me. Because then I can learn, because I don't want to be somebody who just uses my neurodivergence as an excuse to just, behave in a way that's affecting people negatively. And I do want to be, if I've really done something that's hurt somebody, or done something that seems like a real like faux pas in a social situation, like I would really appreciate being told, because I don't see it. Like I don't often see it. And that's definitely a thing that people with autism experience. And so, yeah, like I want people to be aware, and I want people to be understanding, but I also want people to tell me when like there's been a line crossed, So yeah. And I do, like with my neurodivergence too, like I really credit my brain for like the way I'm able to be an artist. Like I think, and like the more that I look at a lot of artists, and like, I'm like, God, there's so much neurodivergence there. Like and I think that it's just, yeah, like so many artists are probably, experiencing differences in the way they experience the world. And that's why we're creating art, because it's just, yeah, like it's an expression of our experience. So when you are like a very highly sensitive person, yeah, like it's definitely, I feel like it's really expressive art comes more easily when you have that inner landscape of being just like really, really sensitive and really open to all the sensory experiences going on around you. And you have like, this constant inner dialogue, inner landscape that's just like, that never stops. It's like the Energizer Bunny. Like I'll talk to people every once in a while, and I've had people disclose to me that they have like no inner dialogue, and I'm just like, what is that like? What is it like to not have?
And the gulf is unfathomable, right? The gulf is unfathomable to being like that. If I took that away, there might be nothing back behind it sometimes. So like, how do you deal with the nothing?
Yes. So yeah, I'm thankful for, even though like I struggle with some things as a result of being on the spectrum, I definitely also really, really do some things well in terms of especially my art.
Well, in your comments about art, I was thinking a lot about the form that things move in, whether it's by your hand, whether it's the song. I was even thinking of the sounds that you were talking about and patterns being shaped. If we're talking about sound in music, and a really powerful thought of of art as taking form. On art, what is the role of art then? What do you think the role of art is? And the question I ask, because I usually ask another one related to it, is, has that changed at all? The world feels different for a lot of people. It's climate or post-pandemic, or things feeling different for folks. Has the role of art changed as well?
Yeah, I think the role of art really comes back to that whole healing piece, and like I feel that it's a universal healer, and it's sort of, yeah, it's allowing your spirit like a true expression while you're here, like on this plane and in this physical form. It's making it's sort of like a playful expression of your spirit's journey, and you're sort of, you can work through some karmic things with it. I really deeply feel that it's spiritual. Like art is spiritual, and it's pretty hard to disentangle spirituality from art, because like, yeah, I feel that it is like your essence coming through in some form that other essences can sort of relate to,
Yeah.
I feel like that feeling when you listen to like a really good song and you kind of get tingly and like, ooh, and like chills almost, goosebumps. I was listening to an interview with Trent Reznor, and he was talking about how that's what he wants people to experience from his music. He doesn't want to, like, his goal was never like a chart topper or like, to make a bunch of money or whatever. He just wanted like to evoke that like goosebumps feeling in people. And I think that is like your spirit tapping in some way to that other person's spirit. And so I feel that's sort of the function of art, is just like a spiritual expression of your innermost self, however people want to define that. And
Yeah. I
yeah, no, go ahead.
No, it's just wonderful. You mentioned goosebumps. I've had goosebumps conversations recently, because I think it's just fun to talk about with music, right? With experience, because for me, that experience is raw and immediate. You can't control it. You can't sit there and say, "Oh, I fucking love the bass," like in this track, which would be fine. It's not an analysis. It's not thought. It's experience. And I had I mentioned this a couple times. I had Shara Nova, formerly Shara Warden, amazing singer, and I had first encountered Shara when she was touring with the Decemberists, The Hazards of Love, and the voice that she lends is just goosebumps. And during that tour, there's kind of famous covers that they did during that of "Crazy on You" by Heart.
Yeah.
And when I saw it twice, when that came off, and like, I'm just water, just goosebumps and everything. And I was lucky to have her on the show, and I asked her, the question is like, how do you do that? She also, I had mentioned this recently, seen her live. I had never seen this before in any performance, and it was quiet because the symphony was there as well. But she hit this note, and I heard two people just whelp out loud at the same time, unmitigated, uncensored. And that's where the philosophy is. It's like,
yeah,
like that just happened. And I felt it too, but I didn't. I was like, so maybe other people experienced it, but they didn't yelp inappropriately in response to it. But the goosebumps line of and here in Reznor, I mean, I think of that, and you think of not in subtlety, you think in the intense raw energy of like, and
yeah.
I think there, when folks experience it, they're experiencing it in a different, it could be the high note, or it could be the the full aggression that you feel in your heart that's manifest with Nine Inch Nails. I love that area. It's such a fun area to kick around.
It's definitely like, it seems to be, you know, every once in a while I'll encounter people who like just aren't into music, and and I'm always just like, what a unique, like, I can't put myself there. Like, I'm unable to take that perspective of just not being able to experience music that way, because that's just part of who I am. But like, yeah, apart from people who just really don't have an interest in music, that's been almost a universal thing that I talk to people about. Like, people will call it a different thing. Like, my husband calls it the tingles. He gets the tingles in like the top of his head.
Yeah.
And but it seems to be a really universal thing with music. And like, for me, it's usually like, I usually get it with a progression, like a certain chord progression, a certain progression of notes will do it for me. It's never like, sometimes one chord, like a really cool chord, will do it for me. Like, ooh, like that's a really nice chord. But usually it's the way something is weaved together, like as a whole. And like, it's just like super exciting for my soul or whatever.
Yeah, well, I identify like the feeling. It was interesting you mentioned that. It's like, for me, my experience most overt, and the examples I think of is, for me, is the female voice. So it's tied to the female voice. Although I would say that my experience sometimes is different. If I'm thinking of like kind of darker stuff, darker ballads, goth, 80s, 90s, a lot of times I can experience the same feeling. I think, not to have it be so gendered, but like from males, it has to do with like almost the expression of some like frustrated sentiment or something that hits that way. Or I think of Depeche Mode in like transgression, like the ideas of like transgression and like sparkling, or like these kind of big ideas. So, how are you sensitive to it? But I know for sure on the times that I'm like deeply remembering is like female voice hitting that note. And if you as a creator might be like, oh, listen to this right here. Oh my gosh, like something very discreet,
Yeah. And it's so personal. It's so personal. Like, and a friend of mine, like, this was honestly like one of my favorite moments in putting my music out there, is when a friend of mine said that he had this experience with one of my songs, and that he'll listen to it over and over again as like an empowering song. And that was like so cool for me. I was like, F yeah, like this is what I want, as, like if I had an ultimate goal for myself beyond just my own nurturing of my own spirit and my art, like that would be the goal, is to like connect to people on that level where they're just like really having like a core experience of your music. Like that is cool. That is cool. Like I like that more than the idea of like, getting a song on the radio or whatever. Like I prefer the experience of someone just having that core experience with my music, because those are my best experiences with music, both listening to it and creating it, like being in a jam and everything's just like gelling really well and everything's come together. And like I have that experience in a jam as well, like every once in a while. And that's it for me. Like that's the high point. That's the high point in music for me.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to mention one more thing. Got to have an upcoming episode with Action Play, which is autistic artist in company, and one of the individuals involved with that is Jackson Tucker Meyer. I'll have on a show in the near future, but he did a fantastic mockumentary called "Satan Cured My Autism," and plays all the different characters, and what's really cool is he plays his Midwestern mom, and it's really just such a unique, brilliant piece. It got some attention. Satan Cured My Autism, but I'm going to be having some of the folks involved with this became known with Autism the Musical, which I think you can find on Disney, and then there was a follow up, really fascinating, just great feeling of of a teacher says like, nobody thinks we can do this play, has a parent meeting and being like, it's going to be sloppy. We don't know what we're doing. And just building it. It's a really profound and great. I also had the impressionist painter Charlie French, Down syndrome, and beautiful artist. And I think one of the things on the show is, as I go along, because the show has been worldwide and tries to be an open collective, I tend to notice areas of lack like that are just in my head with the show, of being like, well, wait a second, we're talking about art. How do we get this here? Like, I haven't had artists from the continent of Africa yet. Like, and I try, you know what I mean? So like just bringing in more voice to a collective. And I believe talking or understanding neurodivergence in connection to this. I just want to thank you for honestly just in your artist bio to encounter that and to be able to engage on this. I think's a great joy.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm not going to say and not going to speculate or know for sure your answer, why is there something rather than nothing, but I believe you could have some intellectual influences in thinking about something and thinking about nothing in relation to this question. So I wanted to ask you, why is there something rather than nothing?
That's such an interesting question. And it's really funny because I can't remember how old I was as a child. But I wrote this little essay that was called Nothing. And it was like really philosophical for a child. Like, and I don't know where it is now. I don't know if my mom has it or what, but it was like, even like, I feel at a young age, I was really thinking about like Buddhist concepts like that. And so I think that, as a person who's taken a form, it's pretty hard to like contemplate the formless. And so, from a Buddhist standpoint, I can kind of like any conceptualization I have about something formless is inherently wrong. And like only would ever, serve the function of leading me to experience what the formless is like. So I don't think I could ever describe what nothing is as a being who's taken a form. I think that I would have to release this form in order to experience that. And even then, it's not nothingness. It's like, I don't know. It is, but it isn't. It's like, it's formlessness. It's not nothingness,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like nothingness to me is almost like an impossibility.
Yeah.
It like feels like an impossibility. Because even with formlessness, there's still something there.
I dig it. Hey, Jayne, Sacred Cranium. Tell us about electronic music. Before I mention that, electronic music, I think I got into different names and such like that, but I think I got into, say, electronic music a lot towards industrial electronic kind of like area, and towards that big influential band for me, very trashy band, My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult.
Oh yeah, I haven't really listened to much of theirs.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned is they're playing in Portland tonight, and I was so excited because gonna try to get to it, but I tried to remember the last time I saw My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, and I came up with the date, and it was 1994.
Wow.
So, but anyways, on electronic bit, I really dropped into it, got more into kind of like related to industrial electronic sound, early Ministry, thinking about Depeche Mode and keyboards and all that. And I know that's kind of like some of the basis in the background, but tell us about Sacred Cranium.
Yeah, so Sacred Cranium, I mean, developed through my explorations with actually GarageBand and just messing around on there and discovering that they had such a rich library of really realistic, cool sounding synths that I didn't have to, go out and spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on a synth to play around with. So I started just recording some things with GarageBand and eventually moved into Logic Pro. They have a more massive library of different synths on there and different modulators and stuff. And yeah, just I've had a really big interest in electronic music for quite some time. I feel like I definitely started off my interests in music as like one of those people who is like, well, electronic music, it's not real music, like you hear these musical snobs say stuff like this. And I definitely had that experience like early on. And like one of my favorite bands growing up was Radiohead and still is. And
Yes.
And I remember when they released, was it Kid A first or Amnesiac? I think it was Kid A.
Kid A.
Yeah, and like I remember when they released Kid A, I felt like deeply betrayed, and I was like, "What is this? Like you've polluted your like awesome alt rock sound with this like electronic thing," and I was like super angry. And and then like the years went on, and like I discovered, I mean, not much time actually passed in this window of my human experience, but like I discovered 9 Inch Nails, and I really, whatever reason, that really resonated with me at the time, and I started exploring more. As I grew up, my parents played, Depeche Mode, New Order, a lot of stuff like that. So it wasn't like that I hadn't experienced electronic music, and I did like New Order growing up quite a lot. I really liked New Order. Also, like Big Audio Dynamite was one that my dad played a lot.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed them as a kid. But yeah, it was like I had this really experience with being like, oh, I don't like this. But then I started getting into 9 Inch Nails and some other things, and then I started re-listening to some of the stuff from the 80s that I had listened to more in my childhood and getting more back into that. And then just like eventually did a whole deep dive and got really into house music and like everything. And now I love electronic music like so much. Yeah. And I actually find that some of the freshest ideas often now are coming out in that genre, like where I'll hear something and I'll be like, that's new, like that is like, I dig that. I haven't heard that before. Like one group that I listened to that really hit me like that is Plaid. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're a duo from the UK, and their music is so fascinating from a cerebral point of view. They have all these cool polyrhythmic things going through there that meld into like a really cohesive whole by like a midpoint in the song, and it's so cool. Like it's such a cool experience, and it's like always like I'll listen to their songs and like there'll be a melodic progression and it'll go somewhere that I didn't expect, but I love it. Like, you know, somewhere where it goes where you don't expect, and then you're like, ew, you know?
Yeah. For a second, yeah.
But with Plaid, it's always like, oh, I didn't expect that, but I like it, you know? Like,
yeah.
So, like, I find there's so much fresh stuff happening in electronica, and I just love it. I love the whole genre, like, and all the subgenres. There's obviously some things that I don't enjoy, like any genre, but yeah. So I, you know, coming from that sort of background, was really having a lot of fun playing with those sounds that I kind of felt were probably for a lot of years more beyond my reach, because the equipment required was so extensive, you know. And now that we have all these modulated things that are just, you can access right on your computer with a MIDI controller, it's pretty cool to be able to create those kinds of sounds that I really get into, and it really allows just a creative stretch. And you know, when you put on a certain synth tone or some sort of arpeggiating rhythm or something, like it really opens up a new door that, you know, that is created by that sound alone, that allows for a different movement and creativity than what I would experience writing music just with my guitar and bass and drums and whatnot. So it's kind of like a fun experiment, and I'll go through like phases with it. Like sometimes I'll be really into the alt rock project. Like right now, I've got a full band for the first time really ever. I have this cohesive full band that's we're performing, which is so hard to do. Like over the years, I really like built myself into this solo looping artist, or just doing acoustic sets, because it was so hard to get a band to commit to performing together. So I've really pouring a lot of myself into the alt rock stuff now, because of that. I have that going on, and we're performing, and I'm working on an album for that project. But the electronic stuff is really, it's a playful side project, and it's cheekier. It's can be, there's more profanity in it maybe than my other stuff, and it's just kind of a fun experiment that, you know, that kind of turned into some good songs. Like I initially didn't even expect to really release anything under it, and then I was like, oh, maybe I can actually put this out there, and I like it. I will go back to it definitely at some point. But right now it's kind of on hiatus because of the alt rock stuff taking more of the forefront.
Yeah, it'll reemerge, I'm sure. Well, tell us, Jayne, where I saw some of your work on Bandcamp. Where the heck folks go find your music and download it and listen and stream?
So you can find it. I'm almost everywhere except YouTube. Like a lot of my more recent stuff I haven't put on YouTube. I was having some weird stuff happen with YouTube in terms of copyright concerns and stuff. So I stopped because it's really easy to rip stuff off of YouTube. It's becoming easier to rip things off of like Spotify and stuff as well. But at the time it was like, oh, like it's so easy to rip stuff off of YouTube. And I was having some red flags in that department. And so I stopped releasing my stuff on there. I will put, like, if I have an official music video, I'll put it on YouTube. But I don't do it through my distributor anymore. So like if people go on YouTube, they'll only find my 2 older albums and then some of like the singles from my newer albums. They won't find the full meal deal there. All the newest stuff will be everywhere else. So Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp is a great accessible platform because you don't have to, I don't think you even have to make an account to listen on there. It'll give you a couple.
I think that's so. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll give you a couple of free listens, just through your web browser. And then eventually it asks you to buy my stuff if you want to keep listening to it on there. But I think Bandcamp's a good way. And I mean, I have a website that has all the links to everything on it, which is JayneKarmaLamo.com, JAYNE Karma LAMO.com, with all the links there too. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, so I'm recording. We're chatting. I'm down in Mid Valley, Oregon. You're further north here. Want to tell us just a little bit about the area you make your art?
Yeah. So I was for quite a while in the Lower Mainland, BC, around the Vancouver area, university days through my kids' younger days, and we during COVID decided that we were just done with the city, and so we've moved to the Kootenays in BC. We're close to Nelson, BC, which is a real cool artistic hub. If you're ever in BC, Nelson is super art loaded. Like there's just so much going on there. And in fact, I'm in Salmo, and Salmo is just a half hour from Nelson. And in fact, Salmo is this crazy mecca of artists as well. Like I think there's only like the population is maybe like 1,200 people in Salmo, and there is a ridiculously high amount of musicians here, and we have every Friday there's a wonderful local brewery in town called Erie Creek Brewing Company that has an amazing drop-in open mic jam session where like people just come out of the woodwork constantly who are just like amazing musicians, like amazing bass players. Like a couple of weeks ago, dude with a sweet fretless bass was just, riffing out like, could have been on a professional stage somewhere, like, and the musician who runs the open jam, his name's Marty Carter, is just like the loveliest man you could ever meet. So lovely and so multi-talented, plays everything. So we have these epic jams going on every Friday night, and like it's the most amazing little community. Like, and I say, like, I would not have had, I don't think, the experiences I've had with being a performer had I not moved out here. Vancouver is very cutthroat and very, I don't know, unfriendly in a lot of ways. And I was going to start performing there, but then all the COVID thing happened, but I'm really glad that I didn't start performing there and that I started performing here instead, because it was like received so well. Everyone is so kind here and, so supportive. There's another group of musicians called the Selkirk Mountain Music Society that I often play with that have been really supportive of my live performances here. And it's a real beautiful, beautiful artistic community here, like a really well-kept secret, I think, of BC. Because there's so much art and culture going on in this little country town.
I love it. It's great to hear. Well, something rather than nothing has started its friendly invasion, possibly into Salmo. We just started our street team. We got stickers made up with the design by Nick Friesen over in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Nice.
So those stickers are going up and around in Oregon, but we have listeners, guests, kind of trying to get those around in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Madison, Wisconsin, Winnipeg, with Nick putting some stuff up there. So maybe we can get some, add you to the street team and get some of those something rather than nothing stickers over there in this enclave.
Oh yeah. I'd be happy to do that. Absolutely.
All right. You're signed up. I'm an organizer by trade. Once I heard that you're signed up, okay, we're good. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you, Jayne. I know like I said, in talking about your art and the different manifestations of it, and just great conversation around spirituality and thinking about Buddhism. Profound thoughts about sound, just sound, and I don't know, that blood thing there about the gong bath. I think deeply about those immersions. I've done an episode on the practice of forest bathing, Japanese forest bathing, of again, immersion, right? Immersion within the green, within the cadence of the forest. And I just think of sound. I think of feeling in the ear and all that type of stuff. And I don't know, it's really kind of a powerful and inspiring thought of healing, or the potential for it, right? Because things are messed up, it feels like sometimes, and it's nice to have a good song. And
Absolutely, forest bathing is pretty profoundly healing. My friend and fellow bandmate Steve Gosselin, he goes by Steve Mark is his artist name. He plays bass for me, and I play bass for him. With each of our respective individual works, he is a brain injury survivor, and he swears by forest bathing. Like almost every day he gets out into the forest with his dog, and it really helps his health and well-being, like, tremendously. Yeah. It's pretty powerful. And, like, nature has its own acoustic soundscape to offer.
Yeah. Well, everybody, even on that point, Jayne's recent LP, Medicine. I think a lot of times we're talking about medicine in healing here. Jayne, wanted to thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, and the threads here that I can see of with Melissa Oliveri and Canal Music, and just a way and a thread to reach you and to find out about Salmo, about your art. And I don't miss the threads, and it's a happy moment to be able to chat with you and kick around this art stuff. I wanted to thank you for coming on to the show.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm super glad that we're getting to know each other.
Yeah. Hey, and no go rush into Salmo. I mean, it's a hidden enclave, right? Let's appreciate it. Let's appreciate the balance. And but
yes, it's actually really terrible here. Nobody.
Well, but wait a second. There's competing factions. There could be the Chamber of Commerce or the Tourism Board over there being like, yeah, this is the artist enclave that you don't know about. But great to reach you, and really look forward to all the music you create. And like I said, even at nighttime, folks, check out the soundscapes. I can tell you that I know that there are healing elements there for you. So pop onto Bandcamp, look up Jayne Karma Lamo, and just get going with some of the other tracks. Thanks again, Jayne, and rock on.
Thank you, Ken.
Spinning, my head is spinning. Sometimes it feels like the evil is winning. I look around, I start to drown. I feel like my words don't make a sound. They don't make a sound. Each newscast feels like a punch to the gut, to the gut. insane, it is so plain, but we have no one but ourselves to blame. Ourselves to blame. Each year's cast feels like a punch to the gut, to the gut. I can't handle all of this stuff, all of this stuff, all of this stuff. Get me off this misguided bus, or it will be the death of us. Get me off this misguided bus, or it will be the death of us. Oh, when it gets too much, I can't help but laugh, I can't help but laugh. Oh, when it gets too much, I can't help but laugh, I can't help but laugh. Oh, when it gets too much, I can't help but laugh, I can't help but laugh. Oh, when it gets too much, I can't help but laugh, can't help but laugh.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing,